Welcome. I don't even know if I have to bang a gavel for this.
It's a city council.
It's a city council. Okay,
It's
thank you.
official thing.
It's official. Welcome, Jennifer Ye, and we're delighted that you're here. We are going to run a very tight line. I know you've been informed you have 3 minutes for an opening comment. Each of the city councilors will ask a question, and I believe you have copies of the questions before you.
No.
No, you don't. Okay. So they will go around. The city councilors will each ask you a question. You have 2 minutes to answer, and then if we have time, we'll have a follow-up of additional questions. And then just so you know, council will deliberate and make a decision on June 26th at the public meeting. So we will begin, and the first, and your opening statement. All right.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys today about joining the City Council. Community service has always been important to me ever since I was a child doing projects with my parents. Now that I have my own family, I encourage my kids to get involved as well. I tell them to find something that's important to them, determine how they can best get involved, and then follow through. Even if the thing that they do is small, when it's all added up, when we're all doing something, the larger effect is huge. And to me, that's what my work with the neighborhood associations and local government has been all about. One of the things that really got me interested in local government actually happened right before I moved to Eugene. I contacted my city councilor because the sidewalks in every direction from my house would randomly end. And for a family who really enjoyed walking, it was a pretty large safety concern. I wanted to find out if there was money in the budget for sidewalk completion and if there was a list of streets for priorities and how a street could get on the list and just in general how I could get involved. And the response I got back was, thank you for your message. There is little money in the budget for roads and sidewalks, but this issue is very important to me. And this response was completely unsatisfactory. It didn't encourage engagement. It didn't really actually answer my questions. And to be honest, I felt like they were intentionally discouraging citizen involvement. So a few months later, when we unexpectedly moved to Eugene, and I got my first neighborhood newsletter in my mailbox. They were looking for people to join a new committee. I contacted them. I came to my first meeting, and I got actively involved. I had found an organization that was interested in involvement, that was encouraging of people asking questions, and was welcoming of new and different voices. And it was exactly what I had been looking for from that city councilor. And now that I've been working in my neighborhood association for almost 10 years, listening to neighbors, working on issues, sharing information, I'm ready to take that experience and apply it to a city council position. As I tell my kids, I've found what's important to me. I've determined that my experience and my abilities and my unique perspective as a mother and primary caregiver and neighborhood leader can represent the people of my ward, and I'm ready to dedicate the time necessary to do it well. You have a lot of good candidates, but I think I deserve your support because of my dedication to my community, my unique perspective, and my ability to engage citizens. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. And now the first question is Councilor Taylor.
Yes, and you may have already answered this partially. The question is, describe experiences you have had which contribute to your ability to be a city councilor. This could include education, employment, volunteer work, family, or social relationships.
Right. So I think the city council position has a lot of very varied responsibilities. So I think some of my background with the neighborhood association is obviously directly applies to that. You know, I do a somewhat similar job there in that I'm working with citizens with problems. We're also really try to highlight positive things in our neighborhood and work to get people involved that way so that later when there are problems, we have that base of involved neighbors. So I think all those types of jobs directly relate to city council. I'm comfortable working in situations where people are not always happy with me. I've had a lot of experiences in that in my neighborhood association sometimes, but also in my employment. So I'm comfortable with that. And I've learned through a lot of years of working with the public in various jobs how to have a positive interactions and professional interactions, no matter how the person in front of me is acting. And I found that very useful in my neighborhood association. And I feel like that would apply directly here as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And next is Counselor Pryor.
Thank you. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Why don't you tell us how you balance your personal priorities and values with the priorities and values of your ward and also the priorities and values of Eugene as a whole?
Okay. Well, obviously, my personal values determine a lot of what I do and decisions that I make. But I can see where there might be times where my own values might not be the same as other people in my ward. I mean, obviously, our Ward 4 is large and diverse. I'm sure most of them are. And not everyone's going to have the same opinion as mine. In my neighborhood association, when that's happened, I really try to look at where the person is coming from. Like maybe the outcomes that we want are very similar on a larger scale, but sometimes it's the smaller things that are different, how we're going to get there. And so I like to try to find the commonality in that we're all working towards and try to build off of that. So that while everything that we are talking about isn't always the same, I want to try to get that large picture that we're all looking for. Does that make sense? Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. And thank you. Next is Counselor Evans.
All right. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
As a city councilor, how do you define social justice, and how would you lead the city towards its human rights goals?
Social justice. So I think we're all trying to create a community that's welcoming and supportive. And that's for everyone that lives here, and I think that's sometimes difficult. I think actively bringing people to the table from different groups is important, and I think that doesn't mean waiting for them to come to you. I think it means going to them. I think that really helps, and how you go to those different groups can really make a difference in bringing them to the table. So for me, a lot of social justice is what's important to me, is just getting people to the table to talk about things. I've grown up in a very similar area. People very homogeneous. I grew up in Southern Oregon. Most people are white. It's a little more conservative than up here. So I appreciate the welcomeness that I feel here in Eugene. My kids are biracial, and so it's become more evident to me how important that is through their experiences. So yeah, I guess that's my answer. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to skip Counselor Semple and move to Counselor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, Jennifer, just so you know, too, my question is going to sound a lot like Chris's, I think, oddly. We ask everybody the exact same questions, though. So
Yeah, that's okay.
Please tell us your general impression of the people of Ward 4 in general, their common views and values compared to other wards, maybe, and what makes you the best fit to be the representative of the people of Ward 4.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I think the ward is pretty diverse. I think we have a nice mix of people up there. We have obviously pockets of lower income and also pockets of higher income. This is something we deal with a lot with in my specific neighborhood, but it spreads out throughout the whole ward as well. I think the ward has a reputation of being very conservative, but I think that's a little less than reality. I think it's pretty well balanced in people's views and what they're looking for. I think when we go out and we talk to people about what's important to them, we hear a lot of the same similar things, no matter where they fall on different spectrums. So people are really looking at the things that make their town more livable. So they're really interested in parks. They're really interested in roads. The things that you think of first when you think of what the city provides. But what we've also found is that they're really concerned about helping their neighbors. We do a lot of reaching out projects, social service projects in our neighborhood, and people have really responded to those over the years. And we've had interest in the areas that are outside of our neighborhood, kind of looking at what we're doing. So I know the people in the rest of the ward are really interested in those things as well. So I think while there are obviously going to be differences, in people wherever you live, there's a lot of commonality and of perspective and priorities in our ward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
In a survey done by the city, 75% of Eugene residents agreed that climate change requires much stronger regulations of greenhouse gas emissions. First part of the question is, do you agree or disagree with this statement and why? And the second part is, when it comes to funding climate change projects, do you see them as being on par with other essential services such as libraries, parks, police, and fire, or do you think funding is more discretionary and we should fund these projects as money becomes available?
Okay. So the first part was the greenhouse, 75%. Can you say it one more time real quick?
75% of Eugene residents agreed that climate change requires a much stronger regulation of greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
The second part is funding.
Well, I think that's going to definitely be part of the answer. I mean, I think we've already been looking in this community at transportation and how transportation changes can affect, greenhouse gases, how we can improve that through bikes and walking and public transportation. But I think that's just going to be one piece of the whole puzzle. I think if we're going to make a huge changes, like a 50% reduction, I believe is what the ordinance is looking at. It's going to take more than just the transportation, and it's going to take individual changes at household levels, but it's going to take large system changes as well, which gets into that second part of how are we going to fund these things. A lot of these projects oftentimes have a upfront cost, a large upfront cost. I know just personally in my own life, we try to make changes every year that can do things better for the environment. Sometimes they've worked and sometimes they haven't, but a lot of them have a large upfront cost, and you have to, as a family and as a city, you have to prioritize, where am I going to get this money, and is it worth the other sacrifices I'm going to have to make? I think that the whole concept, this triple bottom line that you like to all talk about quite a bit, can really help in this area, because while the environmental piece is important, we also have to look at the economic strength of our community and social issues of equity when we're making these decisions. So while I might be able to afford to put solar panels on the top of my house, am I going to be able to feed my family and pay my bills the next month? And, I'm going to make up that cost in 15 years, but what have I given up to be able to do that? So I think that we need to remember that essential services in our neighborhood are important, and while these are important too, I think there are things that are more important. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor Syrett.
Thank you. So, how do you view the role of neighborhood associations in determining city policy, keeping in mind that not all Eugene neighborhoods have an active association?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the $1 million question at NLC, probably. I think neighborhoods are a good piece of the puzzle. I mean, they certainly, even as a neighborhood leader, I'm happy to recognize that it's not the only group in the city that needs to be listened to. It's a nice place to start because it's a gathered group of people that are already invested and are usually paying attention and usually have an informed opinion just because that's important to them. That's why they're there. But it's certainly not the only opinion. And if you only listen to neighborhood associations, I think you'd get a skewed view of what the city as a whole believes in, but it's certainly a resource. I think one of the nice things about neighborhood associations is they can kind of be an incubator for people that then end up on boards and commissions because they're gaining that experience and also that just the confidence to be able to go out and do more things. So I think they're certainly important. Obviously, I've spent a long time being in one, so but I don't think they should be the only thing you look at or the only group that you look for. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Semple, we've saved your question. If you want to catch your breath, I can read it for you, or if you want to just flip to your page, You can read it yourself.
I think I remember what it was in my
And
deep
it's right in the
apologies.
packet, right in
But
front
look
of
at
you.
this.
You don't have to actually.
All ready for you.
What do you think about City Hall?
Oh.
Include process, location, design, and most importantly, funding.
Okay. Well, I was lucky enough. I got put on a committee to get to meet some of the designers at one point in this process. It's kind of hard to keep track of it all, but yeah. So, I think overall, obviously a city hall is important, and we need to have one. The old one wasn't. My understanding is it was not very safe, and there were some issues. So certainly, it was probably time to do something about it. But we can't just keep pushing it down the road and letting someone else take care of it later. So, but personally, I kind of like the idea of the butterfly lot. But I'm not married to it. But there's a lot of good ideas out there. I'm not a big fan of putting it in the eWeb area. I think that land, that area could really be useful for other things. It's a really it's a great opportunity to be able to put something down there right on the river. I think that's great. My husband wants a condo. But funding, that's always a fun question. I can't say I'm an expert on all the different funding sources and how we might pay for it. I think we need to choose a design that's reasonable for what we can afford. Clearly hundreds of millions is not a good idea for us, but also we need to have in the building the things that we need. And you can't skimp on things that are going to be important later just so that you can get something done now. So I think being careful and making careful decisions and planning it out is really important. I hope that answers your question.
Great. So we do have a couple of minutes for additional questions. If anyone has a follow-up question, we need to finish completely in 7 minutes, so I might restrict answers to just a minute.
Okay.
So if there are multiple follow-ups. Are there multiple? I have Mike in the queue. Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead, Councilor Clark.
Hello.
Hi.
I appreciated how you answered my question.
Oh,
there was a second part of it, and I didn't
Okay.
hear you.
Oh, sorry.
My question was very long-winded, though.
It's okay.
So
What was the second part?
what a surprise for me to do that. I wanted, the second part was, why do you feel like you're the best fit
right.
to represent those people?
Right. Okay. Well, I think one of the things that's made me successful in my neighborhood is that I really look for collaborations. That's something we've really focused on in Harlow is getting different stakeholders at the table. So we work with businesses, we work with people, we work with our local schools that are in our neighborhood, we work with faith communities. We've actively tried to find different groups to bring to the table so we can all work for common goals. And I think as a city councilor that those skills will be very useful in bringing different groups with possibly divergent opinions together. And just trying to find where we have common ground. That's where I've really tried to focus in Harlow is where do we have common ground that we can build on? And then when we have those divisive issues, we don't see each other as enemies. We've already worked together on something positive. And so we can work through some of the more difficult things because there's a level of trust and a level of believing that we all care.
Awesome, thanks.
Well done. A minute is tough.
Yeah.
Well, it stops at a second.
Councilor Zelenka.
This isn't related to climate change. It's related to the fact that you don't have to, but assessing your willingness to run a campaign and the ability to do that and your past experience
Right.
doing that to become a city councilor.
Well, I have no past experience doing that, so I'll be honest there. I have run for chairman of the Harlow Neighbors, but anyone who's been involved in a volunteer organization knows that you're frequently encouraged to run rather than having an opponent. So I have not ran a campaign before. I have some very smart friends who have experience doing it, and I've gotten some advice from them, and we've been talking about what we can do. And if you don't choose me for this, which I obviously think you should, I'll be running a campaign. I'm not going to give up just because one group of people thinks I'm not qualified. that's fine. I think I am, and I'll give it my best shot at the election, so.
Thanks.
Great. Any other follow-up questions, more clarification? Anything you need to hear since you didn't hear the beginning?
It's going to be on tape.
It's going to be on tape, yep.
I promise I will watch and listen to it.
That's okay.
That's great. Okay, I think we are
All right.
ahead of time, thanks to your very succinct answers. Thank you very
Well, thank
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, no, I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Okay, now we're 10 minutes ahead of
If
schedule.
that were true, he'd always be walking out.
Nobody left to ask a question.
Totally forgotten, but had planned to be here at 11:15 anyway, and that didn't work out. And then I get Lena's messages, I'm already logging out.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
It's okay, Emily.
I just
None
let
of us
up.
have ever
all
done
the
anything
time.
like that.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that.
I think everybody did a good job of being succinct,
Yes, it was very good.
including all
Very
the
good,
counselors.
That's good.
Very.
That's because we're just reading.
Which is harder for us.
I know.
Actually, if John Jaworski is here, we could start earlier and then be less
They might be
deep in
looking
touch.
for him.
He's here.
I think John Jaworski's
The
next.
other
He did
person,
walk in.
Yeah, I saw him.
And I think he's here, so
we could start.
Yeah, we can start.
we could start early. I mean,
Sure, why
time is
not?
an issue, and why keep everyone waiting? Thank you. I'll just have to pay attention to what time we really start.
Psychoanalysis. Psychology.
Are we going to take a break after 2?
No, we're going to
Power
march
through so
through
you
so
can
that
get
you
to
can
your
get out of
appointment.
here.
We're going to power through so you can get done.
Just for you, Betty.
I might have to go to the restroom.
Go now.
Go now. Go now if you need a break.
Off you go, Betty.
Oh,
Yeah, this is
I
your
don't need
moment.
it yet.
Okay,
Thank you.
well,
I feel like a child.
Joe. And he must have gone off somewhere.
Told you to go before we left home.
That doesn't sound familiar to me at all.
Yeah, yeah. Another one of those, I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that.
Yeah, no kidding.
So he's not here.
He walked in, but
He walked in, but he went somewhere.
Maybe he went to
To the bathroom. Before you left.
I love how prescriptive this is. So great.
Well done.
So great. It takes all the
Under
uncertainty
legal
out of it for me.
obligation to ask each candidate the same question.
Yeah, no, that I knew, but I just love the way Beth set it up for us.
Very well done, very well organized.
They're good questions.
Yeah, they're good questions.
But the extra questions you aren't obligated to do.
No.
I think Glenn
ones.
said, if we don't ask the same questions and then someone's unhappy with the result, they could make a case of
Claim that there was favoritism.
kind of discrimination.
Disproportionate treatment. Nice.
So we only had one extra question, which was mine.
Right.
Yours was just to clarify
was a
your same
clarification,
question.
Clarification doesn't count if the person doesn't.
Right.
So I'll just remember to ask about.
Oh, good, and there he
you're gonna
is. There he is, so we might set 5 minutes early, that would be great. Okay.
Good.
I think yours was a good question that you should ask them all.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Because what you just said, you have to.
Good morning.
Right. Oh, good morning. Good. Well, yes.
Wait,
it is.
it's still
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members, but it's not quite there.
We're a few minutes ahead of schedule, and we're all happy about that. So thank you for being here early, and it enables us to get started. So just a couple of reminders. You'll have 3 minutes to do an opening statement, and then each of the counselors has a specific question, and they'll ask that question, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer the counselors' questions. And then if we have time and there are additional questions, we'll go back around and counselors can ask for clarification or an additional question. And then the process will be the council will make a decision about this at the meeting, public meeting on June 26th. So those are the ground rules. That's where we're going. And so your opening statement.
All right, well, I'm excited to be here to interview for the Ward 4 council seat. I've been a resident of Eugene for approximately 20 years. I initially moved into Ward 6 and lived there for about 10. My children graduated from Churchill High School. When they left, we downsized and we moved into Ward 4. Since the kids have left, I had more time, so I had the opportunity to participate and volunteer for a lot of activities, and those activities have educated me regarding the residents' views in Ward 4 and made me confident that I can represent the views and concerns of Ward 4 residents. I first served during those years as a board member, the chair of the Cal Young Neighborhood Association. During that time working with the city, I spearheaded the formation of 3 new active neighborhood associations: Northeast Neighbors, Good Pasture Island, and the smaller, the redefined Cal Young. I then served as the first chair, since I lived there, as Northeast Neighbors, and I'm still currently a board member. I also participated with the city in the development of a SNAP, a Strategic Neighborhood Action Plan. And with that, we had over 700 participants in our survey, which actually set some sort of a record, they told me. It took us about a year and a half, and I learned a lot more about the desires and wishes of the neighbors, and at the same time, did this through outreach and participation. I've also had the opportunity to listen and learn and address many issues with other Ward 4 residents, such as the location of the cell tower and road improvements when I was in Cal Young, the rapid development of approximately 2,000 residential units and the implications on that on the intermodal safety issues in Northeast Neighbors. It is through these activities that I have worked with people throughout the ward, many of whom have encouraged me to actually apply for this seat. I also had the opportunity to learn and listen and understand issues on a citywide basis because I'm a past chair and I'm currently on the Eugene Planning Commission. And through many outreach meetings, public hearing processes, I've been actively involved in these have contributed to my knowledge about residents citywide run. I've been involved with Envision Eugene, the Riverfront Master Plan, everything from, and I can see time is flying, everything from development, 2530, transportation plan, et cetera. As such, I feel I can be an effective city councilor, working not only for the Ward 4 residents, but for the Eugene community as a whole. Finally, my past career positions have given me technical expertise that will help me in being able to contribute as a council member. I have background in land use planning, economic development, strategic planning, et cetera. I also have military service, and I've directed several agencies. I will be a counselor who is committed to building relationships and trust and demonstrating respect for the different people with whom I work for. I believe my track record demonstrates that I have sustained this commitment to these values.
Thank you.
Being retired, okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I thought I did.
And our first question is from Councilor Taylor.
Okay. Describe experiences you have had which contribute to your ability to be a city councilor. This could include education, employment, volunteer work, family, or social relationships.
To be a good city councilor? I think that what I did in my introductions somewhat alludes to some of those
I think
things.
you did.
Yeah, and because I didn't know how the introduction was supposed to go. So I just think that working with people and being a people-type person, I think that I can be a good city councilor. What I saw in our area, and the reason I want to be a city councilor, is that, and I'm timed on this too, I see, is that there was some frustration from people when they were having things come into the community. And that frustration leads to negativity, and it is directed toward government. And I saw that lots of these types of issues that they were facing was because of a lack of knowledge of where the city was going and other issues, and the fact that there are constraints placed on the city and what they can do to address them. So I felt as a city councilor, I could be in a position to advocate for my ward and communicate back to them and educate them about what's happening, where the city is going, programs that will impact them eventually and that they should be aware of, and at the same time get more feedback to come through. I also felt that based on my past experiences, I could really contribute to the overall objectives that the city is trying to reach. I love Eugene. I know it's going to grow and prosper. I'd like to be a part of that and help in formulating where it goes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Councilor Pryor.
Thank you. Hi, John.
I can say.
Please tell us how you would balance your personal priorities and values with the priorities and values of your ward, and then the priorities and values of Eugene as a whole.
I think my personal priorities and values reflect what I see in the ward already, to be honest with you. The people that I've been dealing with are similar to me. I don't see them as that much different. I don't see a lot of, negativity in people as per se. So I think that I wouldn't need to necessarily balance that. But also the same in dealing with the city as a whole. I don't think there's any balance between my personal issues and those of the ward and the city. I think what's needed there is to communicate that my personal issues and values sometimes aren't to be reflected, because I can't take personal issues. I have to look at what the evidence says, what the people are saying, what the legal constraints are, and that balancing can sometimes move in a different direction. I also have to be able to reach consensus, because there's going to be different perspectives that are coming in that I'm going to have to balance with and come together with them on moving in a certain direction. So I don't think I see a real issue there in trying to balance that.
Great, thank you.
You're quite
Thank you. Next is Councilor Evans.
All right, welcome, John. As a city councilor, how do you define social justice, and how would you lead the city towards its human rights goals?
Social justice is an interesting term. I think it's hard to define. I think that when you look at equality in all issues, and when you look at from a perspective of programs and policies and how they affect people, I think that social justice is taking a look at are we reflecting in our actions those issues that will impact those people in a good way, that fall into social justice areas. I don't know how exactly I would be a leader in this, except demonstrating that through the way I conduct myself as a counselor, talking about it when I go into my ward, finding out how other residents feel about this, and maybe moving forward, either trying to change their perspectives on this, and seeing what programs the city may be developing and have, and how I can participate in moving that forward. I'm not quite sure of any programs the city has come forward with that are classified as social justice per se. I just see it as a component part of a lot of things that are being done.
Thank you. Next is Councilor Semple.
What do you think about City Hall? Include process, location, design, and most important, funding.
I could think a lot more if I was privy to the information that you all had rather than what I read in the paper. So, City Hall, as I understand the issue, a new City Hall was needed because of ramifications from earthquake, whatever, and it was an older building. I wasn't quite sure why everything moved so fast in getting the people out of City Hall and all through parts of the, let's say, the city per se, in branch offices, and maybe why the building was taken down before you knew where you were going to be building one. So I was a little confused there, and like I said, I'm only reading things, and I know it's a difficult process. I know that there are negotiations going on with the county. There was sites that were being looked at that you evaluated. I'm not privy to the information on the specifics you received of the pros and cons of each site, so it's hard for me to say. I personally believe that a city hall should be located somewhere in the center of the city, or at least on the peripheral of the center of the city where the center is expanding. And I think that that's important. I also believe that a city hall should be like your library, should be a beautiful building that reflects the city. It should be something that stands for something, so that when they see City Hall, that's City Hall. Good. So from that perspective, It's hard to say. I know you're in negotiations now and some legal ramifications to see if, in fact, you can either swap property, if that's legal or not. I don't know what the fallback positions are that you may have discussed. I just think that from what I've been reading and what I hear out there in the area is that something should move forward quickly is all that I'm hearing. It's taking a long time and it should be resolved. And I think you are working to that. And I try to tell them when they tell me that, from what little I know, that being on the planning commission, you face a lot of legal obstacles and constraints, and it's not always going to move as fast as you'd like.
Thank you. Well done. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, John.
Hi.
Okay, please tell us your general impression or to characterize the people of Ward 4, their, say, common values and views compared to maybe other wards, and then what makes you the best fit to represent the people of Ward 4?
Okay. One of the things that I can say about Ward 4 is that, 2 minutes, one of the things I can say about Ward 4 is I call it a transition area. Whatever, it's an area that had laid dormant and wasn't doing much because it was like an outside neighborhood area that you live in the suburbs. Well, you're not in the suburbs, you're in the city. And recently with what's happening along Coburg Road and with the impact of infill and also all the development up in northeast Eugene, there's a lot that's changing in Ward 4. We're going from individuals like myself who still live there that raised their children and now they're living there by themselves. That's what Ward 4 used to look like. In the last few years now, we are going to have maybe 6,000 plus new renters. They're younger, they have children, they have families, their attitudes are totally different. So I think that I've been part of that development. I'm out there walking in a neighborhood when this is happening, and I'm listening to their talk and what their concerns are. One of them is recreational areas, to be honest. And so as a result of that, for their kids and what have you, I think I can represent what they want because I've been working with them as this development has been occurring. I've been seeing the changes in the transition. When they were older, like myself, they were probably more conservative than they are now. I'm not saying that they're not really conservative, but the way that I see it, they see things happening to them. They want to get involved and more engaged, and in doing so, they know that there are going to be programs that are going to help them. There are going to be citywide issues that are going to help them. They need to know more about them. But all they want to be, as far as conservatives, they want them to be effective, they want them to be efficient, and that's how they look at it. They just don't want to say no or let's keep this the same. That was an attitude when I first moved there, is they had that attitude because they liked where they were. Everything was fine. That's changed, and I see that changing when I'm out in the community.
Thank you. And next is Councillor Zelenka.
John, my question is about climate change. In a survey done by the city, 75% of Eugene residents agreed that climate change requires much stronger regulation of greenhouse gas emissions. Do you agree or disagree with this statement is the first part. The second part is when it comes to funding for climate change projects, do you see them as on par with essential services like libraries, police, parks, fire, or do you think funding is more discretionary and should be and we should fund these as money is available? So the first part is stronger regulations, and do you agree or disagree? Then funding.
Okay. I'm a strong believer in climate change, although it's not really a belief, it's a scientific fact. So from that on, as far as climate change and what the city is doing, I think it's moving in the right direction by some of the resolutions that has passed and the way that it's trying to look at density and look at the way vehicle traffic is going and reduce emissions. As far as regulations that might affect, let's say, businesses or emitters, or I believe RAPA is involved. I know that the city funds them to some degree. I don't know if they're the only funder. I think that there should be more of an emphasis in regulating these issues because we have to start somewhere. There should also be more advocacy because cities like Eugene that are making a positive step forward and other cities throughout the United States are only a small part. We need to get the state more involved in this as well as the federal government and let them know that this is an issue that needs to be addressed and to work with us. So I think that needs to be done. I have some real issues and do support regulatory. Where I worked for 20-some years, I had 4 paper mills. So if you want to talk about emissions and what's permitted and used, you should live in a paper mill. And the only thing you hear then is when you go there for the first time and you go, whoa, and people say, that's the smell of money. So I don't want to see that happen in Eugene. I don't want it to be the smell of money. I want it to be an area where we can live, we can prosper, and we can be healthy. My children are grown, but I'm going to have grandchildren. So I want to see that go, and I see more regulation as something that's needed.
Thank you. And Councillor Syret.
Hi, John. So how do you view the role of neighborhood associations in determining city policy, keeping in mind that not all Eugene neighborhoods have active associations?
Yeah, I participated on several of them. I attend the NLC Neighborhood Leadership Association. I know a lot of the neighborhood leaders, and I've worked with them on certain kinds of issues. I think you used the term, how should neighborhood associations in determining policy? I don't know if it's determining policy. I see neighborhood associations as a way that the city can have what I call like feeder back as another mechanism rather than one-on-ones that I know you do as counselors, where they can advise, where they can come forward and in a more formative role, tell you the kinds of things that are happening in their neighborhood, the issues that they see. I don't think they should be really determining policy. And I feel that strongly, being on several neighborhood association boards. But I think if the role of the neighborhood associations are to educate their neighbors, which is something we've tried to do in Northeast Neighbors, about what's happening, what they can do, what legally can they do, why can't they stop a development because they're doing nothing wrong, what the code says, etc. If they want to see changes like that, they should come forward to the city and let them know that these are some issues we have with, and maybe some code changes need to be modified slightly or whatever. And sometimes that's best done, I feel, by policy people than necessarily lawyers, because it gets so technical nobody understands it, and then you always challenge definitions. So I think from neighborhood associations' perspective, they should be advising you and be viewed as a way to let you know what's going on, how they react to things that you're saying, but not really determining where things go, only influencing possibly.
Thank you.
Great. So that finishes the formal questions. We have about 7 minutes, so we have time for a couple of follow-up or new questions if counselors have them. So was that a wave like you have one? No. Anybody need a follow-up? Councilor Evans.
A little bit of follow-up and maybe some clarity to my question.
Let me just say one thing. These are really short answers, 1-minute answers.
John, how would you approach the issue of poverty in our community as a counselor? And, how do you see the city moving forward to address and try to reduce and eliminate poverty?
1 minute.
Yeah.
1 minute, yeah.
Yeah, good luck.
Poverty is relevant and usually defined in terms put out by federal governments, but there's also, besides poverty without having money, there's other kinds of poverty that people have by not having access to choices. I would see in addressing poverty, everybody usually states, well, let's find some jobs. And if you can have jobs and you can have a good community, the people will work their way out of poverty. The issue is even what we see in the urban expansion. When you create jobs, a lot of communities go for a very difficult task, which I worked in for 20, 30 years, is an attraction policy. I do not believe in an attraction policy to address poverty. I believe in a retention policy by working with what's here, helping it grow, creating those programs, finding out what they need, creating the educational programs to assist them, and getting the local people involved. That's a way that you can address those kinds of issues in a very...
Perfect. Thank you. Councilor Zelenka?
John, you don't have to, but if you get selected or not selected, yet run a campaign to be a city councilor in the fall potentially. So what's your experience doing that? Would you do that, and you're interested in doing that?
I've helped people with campaigns. I have not done a campaign for an elected official, but let me just say, would I be interested or would I do that? By choosing to be a counselor, it was a very tough decision. It was tough only because it took a long time. I talked with a lot of people. I talked with a lot of friends, relatives, people in meetings, and most importantly, I talked with my wife for a long, long time. Because being a counselor is a commitment. It's going to take both of us to want me to do what needs to be done as a counselor. And so I had extensive conversations with her about, this isn't for the short term. If I get it, I'm not there just to fill in the interim. It's going to lead to a campaign. I'm going to be out in the neighbors. I'm going to be running again. Because the things that I want to hope to accomplish and be part of and follow through to see Eugene move forward is not going to be done in a year or two. Some things may, but not really. It's going to take some time to bring everybody around to having that happen.
All right, thank you very much. No, so thank you very much for throwing your hat in the ring, coming and answering our questions, and being so succinct that we're on schedule. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Thanks, John.
I had a lot of questions, but for you guys. But
Thank you.
We keep growing farther ahead
I know.
of schedule here.
ahead of schedule.
It was good.
We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
We give him 3 minutes.
I guess I should have I could have, so the 1 minute is challenging. But
1 minute's challenging.
1
good,
minute's
though.
tough, but,
You've already given it to one,
Yeah.
two, you got to give it
and
to
the
two.
reason,
also
and the
makes
reason
you-
was I couldn't be sure that the subsequent interviews would go so quickly, so I couldn't I couldn't be sure that I would have time for multiple.
I think 1
I'm
minute's
getting an
good.
uncomfortable feeling that anybody's being cut off.
Yeah, good.
They can't say it in 1 minute.
We all have to
Everybody's got
We all
to,
have
by
to
the
work
clock.
in 3 minutes.
everybody's got to learn it, so, okay, I hope you're all right. It was just
The
like, I
1
didn't
minute
know.
is actually important to see if they can crunch it into a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't have to, solve world.
How do you end
No,
poverty in
we
1
don't
minute?
expect
Go.
Exactly.
We don't expect a dissertation, right?
We didn't have a question like that on the list.
We could ask the purpose of meaning. What is the purpose of meaning?
What's the
What's the purpose of life?
You got 1 minute. And it better be right.
Yeah, we're counting on you.
Describe each city councilor.
But see, the response was good.
How many windows are there in Ireland?
You know,
Yeah,
How many holes does
good.
it take to fill Albert Hall?
Well, it also indicates whether they've given it any thought whatsoever before.
Right.
Which I think he obviously has.
I would have said, it's impossible. Don't ask me that.
Thinking about all of that.
Are we being recorded now? We are.
Yes, we are.
so, yes. Proceed with caution, but if you need a break, this is your moment.
No, I think she wanted to say something.
I just have your best interests at heart.
I was
Just
going,
want you to know.
thank you.
We'll ask after every interview.
Well, if we get through early, I can go at the end. I was going to say, this won't hurt anything. Once, when I was chair of the English department, I visited a class, and the teacher quickly changed her plans and asked them to write a description of me.
Wow.
Oh, that's thinking on your feet.
And then they read it to you?
No, they gave them to me, all of them.
No.
But she didn't want to teach in front of me.
Is Jennifer here? No, okay.
Oh, not yet.
Right,
Oh, we should.
right.
They were told to be here 10 minutes early, right? Then she should be here.
She'll be here any minute.
Cold cuts.
Mike has left us.
He's just back there.
He's just right there. He's talking to Pat.
Being interviewed is interesting. One of the things I work with my students.
Oh, yeah, Pat is.
Well, and the kinds of questions they ask now are really, I don't want to say they're tricky, but they're really geared towards trying to get to know who you are as a person and not just what you know how to do.
Or,
So how many windows are there in Ireland is an actual interview question that is asked.
Yeah, what's the point of that?
That's the
To-
whole point.
to
The point
see
is
how
to
you
say,
think.
What is your thinking process? Do you baloney an answer, or do you answer it to the best of your ability?
How could I possibly know
You
that?
say, I don't know how many windows are in Ireland, but here's how I would find out. But if you say, oh, well, let me see, if you take the 2 and multiply by the 6 and take out the 4, I say there's 782,433 windows in Ireland. And immediately, it's like,
0.4.
What if the response is, why would you ask me such a
Yeah,
ridiculous
that's would be
question?
my, it's like, why do I want this job if you're going to ask me such a crazy question?
well, then they say, okay, if you don't want it, you don't have it, yeah. But the kinds of questions
Obviously,
they
you
ask
ran out of
now
questions.
are geared towards putting you on the spot and see how
Yeah,
you
right.
deal with those situations.
We used to, at Emerald, we used to ask a lot of hypotheticals. How would you do this? What would happen?
Yeah.
How would you handle this?
Or if you were an animal,
Especially if they were
what
supervisors.
animal would you be?
Going to be supervised.
That's another popular one.
If they were testifying before a Senate committee, they would refuse to answer that.
That's right.
Or just say, I don't recall.
Or. the
25
best-
times.
This is now a meme. I can't answer that question in a public setting.
That's
Yeah.
right, yes,
That's the new
right.
meme.
I can't, and
Why didn't you clean up your room? I can't answer that question in a public
public
setting.
setting.
Yeah, you see little kids doing that. There's Jennifer.
I'm surprised someone hasn't said you have a really bad memory
Yeah, really.
to this.
So I'm going to start using that all the time. When somebody asks me a question, I can't answer that in a public setting.
Really so
Not
infuriating.
recall.
So
But if you want to know how many windows there are in Ireland,
Well, I can answer
I'll tell you that privately.
I could tell you.
I can't answer that anyway.
I can't answer that in a public setting.
Meet me out in the hall.
You're right.
Roger Clemens, I misremembered.
I misremembered, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I misspoke. There she is.
Job interviews are interesting these days. I wouldn't want to go through one.
Hi, and welcome. We're starting here at. Good. Welcome. Thank you. And we'll give you just a second to catch your breath because we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which
Excellent.
is sort of a gift to us, but maybe not to you.
Water's for you.
And there's a water bottle there if you need that, so, all right, 12. Okay.
Well,
Okay,
this is
all right.
oddly familiar.
Okay, oddly familiar, there you go. All right. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I just want to give you a sort of the framework for this conversation. So as you know, you have 3 minutes to give an opening statement. And then that will be followed by each of the counselors has a specific question that they will ask you, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer that question. And then if we have time at the end, we'll give counselors an opportunity to ask a follow-up question, clarifying, additional question, and those will be 1-minute answers. So you got
Lightning round.
3, 2, and 1. And then just the council will deliberate over their decision in the June 26th meeting. So it'll be a public deliberation and a vote at that time. So thank you very much for joining us, and you can begin your opening statement.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to talk with you guys about this position and how I might be able to fill a role, hopefully. So since we last met, about 2011, we moved to Washington State for several years, and for those of you that didn't know. And that didn't actually work out very well for us, but we were really lucky and grateful to have the chance to come back to Eugene. When we moved back to Eugene, I needed to go back to work, and I'm grateful to have been hired at Relief Nursery, where I work now as the Director of Philanthropy. I had served on the board of directors of Relief Nursery for many years, so I was quite familiar with the mission. It's most definitely hard work
in the nonprofit sector, but I've learned so much about the needs and the challenges of this population that we serve. I didn't get it, to be honest with you, my first time around on the city council. And I certainly believe that this work has opened my eyes and deepened my appreciation of and my understanding of and appreciation for our social services network. And in fact, when I speak to groups about Relief Nursery and the services that we provide, I often use that opportunity to mention the wonderful, meaningful, larger social service network that we have. And I like to describe it as a fabric of which many people participate. And it's just really rich, and it's a great value to our community. And I'm really proud to be a part of it, doing my little part of it. So when we moved back to Eugene, we moved into Ward 4 and found our forever home there. So shortly after we settled in, I rode my bike down to George's house to chat and catch up. And I told him that if and when he decided not to run again for his seat, let me know, because I would like to run for that. And fast forward a year or so, and here I am today talking about his vacancy. So I am very interested in filling out the role for George's term. It was a great privilege for me to serve on the City Council, previously representing Ward 6. I tried to be thoughtful, I tried to be responsive and solution-oriented for my constituents, and I wanted to be, and I hope I was, a team player at the table. I did my best to come to meetings prepared. I was also willing to listen to all points of view, because somewhere in the middle of all of that, I really believe that we can find a solution. I've come to have enormous appreciation for all the people who come to testify during the public comment and or public hearings. You know, it's one thing to have an opinion and sit around and talk about your opinion, but it's a whole different thing to take the time to come down, sign up, wait in line, then come up here and face you guys. It's a little intimidating, and to eloquently present your point of view. Oh my gosh. No.
3 minutes.
That was not 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Thank you very much. And
But the next question was.
That's right. Actually, you're in good shape. Councilor Taylor.
This question will probably give you an opportunity to continue, but
Okay.
describe experiences you have had which contribute to your ability to be a city councilor. This could include education, employment, volunteer work, family or social relationships.
I've had many of those opportunities in my 35 years of living in Eugene. I have served on multiple boards of directors and on a lot of different nonprofits in town. And then, of course, I have served 8 years on city council, representing Ward 6. And so then to just continue my comments. To wrap it up, I've worked with 6 of you in the past, and I hope that you found me to be truthful and respectful in our deliberations. Maybe I was even a little bit fun. As to this vacancy and appointing someone who best represents the character and the values and the conservative nature of the ward, I believe I'm the best match, and I hope that you will appoint me, and I would be grateful for the opportunity to serve again.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Councilor Pryor.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Please tell us how you balance your personal priorities and values with the priorities and values of your ward and the priorities and values of Eugene as a whole.
I'm open to listening. I think you just have to have a willingness to respect other people's opinions and their values, while staying true to mine. And again, I think somewhere in between the two, we could find a place that everybody can agree, or at least get close enough. And that is really how I balance those things, is just to be willing to listen and to think about things and be thoughtful, to reach out to others for their opinions. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but I know a lot of people are very personally invested in a lot of the issues that City Council discusses. And so they might not have a seat at the table, but I can be their voice at the table and help represent them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And next is Councillor Evans.
We turn the page. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks, Greg.
As a city councilor, how do you define social justice, and how would you lead the city towards its human rights goals?
That's a great question, Craig. Well, social justice, for me, I believe is just at its basicness, is a chance for everybody to participate and a chance for everybody to say what's important to them and to be heard. And once they can do that and they feel acknowledged and validated, we can go from there. But if we're not hearing, if we're not listening, and if we're not reaching out or looking at asking for input from people, that's not equal, in my opinion. And for the human rights goals, I don't have them. I have not reviewed them recently, but I know that in Eugene and from my previous work, it's important that everybody have a voice and be respected and feel safe in our community as well. And those are all things that I certainly value personally. So it would be easy for me to champion for those values for social justice.
Thank you. And now Councillor Semple.
Jennifer,
Hello.
what do you think about City Hall? Include process, location, design, and most importantly, funding.
Yeah, boy. I'll say that I'm disappointed that we're still talking about this, quite honestly. I recall many a council session about this, and we hired a group in town. I was thinking about this woman the other night. I couldn't remember her name, but she would lead the community forums down at the United Methodist Church. And yes, that's her. She worked so hard for us, and that just seems so long ago. And we haven't made a whole lot of progress there. But I am happy to see the empty lots, so there is some progress. I would certainly want to get more up to speed on it. There's a lot of nuances to the process that you don't necessarily get in the Register Guard. And to be honest with you, I don't watch all of your deliberations on television. But I wonder, personally, I would like to know, isn't there a way that the city and the county could share a building? Would be one of my questions that I would like to have answered, And it appears to be working right now that you are sharing a building. Again, there's probably a backstory there that I'm not aware of. But couldn't we do that on a better level in a safe building, a building that's technologically up to date and secure and easy to get to, and it looks good? We could do that in town. I would also, as for the empty lot, I would personally prefer that it be sold to a third party and they could do some sort of multi-use development there. And to have a whole city block really is quite an asset for a developer. And we would hold the reins. I mean, we could really determine the part that's going to be, what's going to be important in that development, as we've done with other projects as well.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor
Thank you for
Clark.
buzzing me.
Hi, Jennifer.
Yes, hello, sir.
You kind of touched on this earlier, but same question for everybody. So please tell us your general impression of the people of Ward 4, their common values and views compared with other wards, and what makes you the best fit to be the representative of the people of Ward 4.
Thank you. Yes, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this as well. I consider Ward 4 to be very conservative in nature, very family-oriented, and very working class. There are some, of course, some pockets of more affluence, but really a lot of two-parent working families just trying to enjoy their community. They want to be a part of the community. They have opinions and ideas, but they're also, I think, forward-thinking. They like the things that the city of Eugene is doing. I'm thinking mostly of biking right now, the way that we've helped to improve biking, especially in our ward. It's getting to be a little challenging to get around. But it is a conservative ward in terms of values and characters, and I do believe that it's quite similar to Ward 6 in terms of what I represented before. And I feel that at this time, I really do align with those characters and values of the voters of Ward 4.
Thank you. And next is Councilor Zelenka.
Jennifer, mine's about, hi.
Hi.
Mine's about climate change.
I'm sorry, about what?
About climate change. In a survey that the city did, 75% of Eugene residents agreed that climate change requires much stronger regulations of greenhouse gas emissions. Do you agree or disagree with this statement, and why, is part one? And part two, when it comes to funding climate change projects, do you see them as being on par with essential services like library, parks, police, fire? Or do you think funding is more discretionary and we should fund these projects as money comes available? So the first part is 75% agreed, stronger regulations, greenhouse gases, why or why not, and then funding of projects.
My concern around climate change regulation is the enforcement part, and I prefer to take more of an incentive-based approach. And I also am concerned just about the measurement of how we measure climate change and our contribution to it versus Springfield or Cottage Grove. And so those are the issues that I wrestle with personally around climate change. And I would prefer that any change around it just be more incentive-based as opposed to a regulatory approach. I think it's hard. Yeah, I just the measuring part, and how do you assess who contributed that to, if there is an increase, if we're able to demonstrate an increase, who contributed that, and how does that get paid for? I think it's a great question, Alan, and I'm sorry I don't have the answer.
Thank you. And last is Councilor Syret.
Hi, Jennifer.
Well, hello.
So how do you view the role of neighborhood associations in determining city policy, keeping in mind that not all Eugene neighborhoods have an active association?
Well, I think they're an essential part of the deliberations at the council table. They care about our community. They are active in their neighborhoods. They have sort of the boots on the ground narrative for us to hear what's going on in the communities where we don't live. But I know that I relied on the neighborhood associations, and I went to their meetings when I represented Ward 6. And it's a good sounding board, I think, for counselors to go to and to share with the group. They want to know what's happening here at the table, and I think that we're the good, the liaison. It's incumbent upon the counselors to go to those meetings and answer the questions, be available, and I would even bring certain staff members from the city to some of the neighborhood association meetings that I went to in Ward 6. And that was really helpful to put a face on the city of Eugene. And I appreciate the neighborhood associations. And where we're lacking, if there's an area of town lacking, then yes, I think it's up to us to help energize that group and let them make sure they know that their input is important, and that they are welcome. We want to hear from them, and we listen to them, and it's useful to council.
Thank you. So we now have time for a couple of, for additional questions or clarifications. Counselor Semple, do you have your regular?
The Allen Memorial
The
question.
Allen Memorial
Commemorative.
question? Commemorative.
Sorry, still
Commemorative.
alive.
Okay, so just a reminder, these are short. This is a 1-minute answer. Counselors?
Thank you. I just want to get back to my city hall again.
Oh, I know,
How
funding.
do you think we should pay for it? What are even the options for paying for things? And if you want to talk about more than city hall, that's fine, but funding is a big problem.
That is correct. Thank you. I know I didn't finish your question, so thank you for coming back to that. Well, we have some money set aside, and I think if council could demonstrate a reasonably sized budgeted project, and we could unite together to present it to the public, I believe that we could perhaps get a ballot measure passed, or a tax measure passed, to help us fund the gap. Council did it before when we passed the gas tax. We worked at it for a long time, but we remember all those meetings that Eric Jones came to, and he'd say, with this year, with the gas tax, we're going to do these projects, and they spread the projects across the community, and then in the second year, we're going to do these projects all across the community. So every ward benefited from that. I still didn't really answer your question.
Thank you.
You only had 1 minute.
A minute's it's pretty tough.
Thank you.
Counselor Zelenka.
So Jennifer, this is a softball for you. If you get selected or not, you might want to run again to be elected outright. So what's your experience in doing that, and would you do it? What's your interest in doing it?
Oh, sure. Yes, I would run again. And yes, I have experience in doing that. I ran twice in Ward 6, and I had opponents in both elections, and I won both elections in the primary. So, and I know how to campaign. I know how to put together the kitchen cabinet, and I know how to reach out to voters to see what's important to them, and I have my little army of people to help me go door to door, because I still believe in that, and I enjoy doing that. So yes, I would absolutely run again.
Great. Any other follow-ups? Okay. Thank you very much. You came in a hurry and early, and we wrapped it up, so thank you. Very succinct.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your willingness to take this on, so.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here again.
Thanks.
Great. We're early, and I think Carolyn Lundquist has
You have 17 minutes now.
scheduling challenges. I know. Well, I promised you we'd get you out of here on time.
Good. You're doing it.
You need a break?
Yes. Well, this time, I think I'll take it so that you don't
because
say,
we have
we
plenty
gave
of
you a dozen chances and you didn't.
No, we'll start once everyone gets back into the room, we'll start. So if the counselors are here and the
Probably
next
have time to go.
candidate is here, we'll start.
We're done shy of
I could
1:30.
go eat a sandwich.
She was asked to come 10 minutes early, so.
Well, then, you should be here soon. All right. Be back.
I'll be
I'll
fine.
have lunch with you because I haven't had lunch
Could be
either.
here within 7 minutes or 15.
You can just hear the Jeopardy music now.
Dum, dum, dum,
really
dum,
careful.
dum,
Dum, dum, dum.
Upstairs? Not.
Why, yes, smart aleck is my default position. Why do you ask?
Totally forgot.
Life's short, laugh first. That's what I said.
I kept having to remind myself, too.
Sorry to talk across you there, but when Alan's going to give me a straight line like that, I'm sorry.
I know, I
It's
just-
really hard for me to let that one go.
I raised 2 boys. I just, at moments like that,
Well, you're used to being between
I'm
them.
just used,
I raised 2 boys also. I know exactly what you mean.
Try a boy and a girl. That's a load of fun. Let me tell you all about it.
I grew up with an older brother, so
Yeah.
I know that scene.
It's probably very similar to
Right.
my house. My son is a very big athlete. Are we still on the
We're
air?
still, yeah, yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic, the two of them. Never boring.
Carolyn Lundquist, and she has a scheduling challenge because she had to get here, I think, from somewhere else. So she needed to be the last candidate. So my guess is she'll come, not super early.
But, it hasn't been on the table for a while, and it included so many things, like, the process and budgeting and awareness of what's happening downtown. It might not be, I was so glad when I saw your question.
Oh,
So it's
thanks.
like,
Took me a while to get to
that
it.
one's really important. I thought about this for days.
Test of wits.
Oh, Lord. My daughter and I do that stuff.
So, I was really glad, because I think that's critical.
I misread this email, so I thought the deadline was yesterday, and I was like, oh, shoot.
She got it in there.
She can, in fact, keep up and
And
surpass.
she sent us the first three,
Yeah,
so we wouldn't duplicate.
their neurons
and I
fire
sent
faster.
Mine, and then I'm like, 5 o'clock, and I'm
Right,
like,
right.
well, don't I get your
We're on the
Crafty,
down,
though.
we're on the downslope,
Yeah.
and they're on the
Right,
upslope, but
right,
yes, but
right.
experience
Right.
helps balance it out again.
Craftier. But she's,
No, you're right.
City Hall question covers a lot of different.
It has the ability to comment on many things.
Yeah.
And part of it is
Used to be.
see what will they comment on.
Right.
Because, they don't have it written down to check off my 4 categories.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm thinking about all sorts
Well, I read all the reports. Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot to take on.
I just feel sorry for him, really, because he's going to have some fool notion he's in charge or something. She's going to disabuse him of that in about 30 seconds. I just kind of feel bad.
That's great. That's great. She'll be,
Yeah.
she'll play Margaret Thatcher to his Dennis
Yeah.
Thatcher.
Yeah, I have no doubt that someday, one day, future son-in-law will look at me with eyes that say, help. And I'm going to say, well, you're on your own, buddy.
Right.
Sorry, man. Get up.
I know, that's good. Everybody's assembled. We just wait for the next candidate. We're good.
There was nobody out in Lone Pine Farms yesterday late afternoon. I mean, I was really shocked. This is,
Friday afternoon, it was dark when I got. Oh, you went picking.
I was out there
Good.
yesterday, late afternoon,
Nice.
and there was quite literally nobody there. I filled up, in no time flat. I did all this stuff yesterday, and it was like, there's so many berries out there that it's insane.
Some people don't realize that the berries are out there because it's been so cool.
$1.75 a pound, and I mean, I picked 20 pounds of berries and
No,
nothing.
I-
I mean, it was
I
not
took
quite
that
that many, it
one.
was 15, 16 pounds, but, I mean, in an hour and a
Yeah,
half.
that's great. That's great. I didn't pick, I just went out and bought.
I mean, and usually I do that with the kids, but I didn't do that yesterday. But it's just, I was shocked at how quick it went because they were so plentiful.
Right,
And usually,
right.
that's something you gotta.
Yeah, that's what takes the
I
time.
really
You gotta
timed it
hunt
this
for
year.
You
Yeah,
gotta hunt
right.
for the ripe ones, right?
Right, but oh my golly, they were just think the weather has
Do they happen every other?
left people impression perhaps.
They did
But I
last
think they're
year.
not right.
Ready.
People think they're not right because,
Yeah.
Definitely keeping it in
They
mind.
would really like someone to go.
I know.
I might go out and get some more because I got some.
It's a long time, 9 days.
I'm really
I made
thinking that,
strawberry, I made a bunch of stuff. I cooked some up. I'm thinking, well, you know what?
I think
I could
strawberry
really do
shortcake
that.
is tonight.
Did strawberry shortcake on the weekend, and it was pretty wonderful.
Doing mostly jam, but
Well, it takes like a day to get there, doesn't it?
I love strawberry jam. It's really my favorite jam.
yeah,
It's sort of my go-to jam, is strawberry
I
jam.
went to Nepal.
I usually put up about 20 pints of strawberry.
That'll keep you going through the winter.
Oh yeah, all year. Well, and I have two
got there.
Concord grapevines, so I do about another
Nice.
12 to 16
Grape
pints
jelly or
of from the
grape jelly?
grapes I grow.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I do raspberry preserves from our raspberry fence
Nice.
too. So with that I give some away and we're good all year. You
You're
know.
good. I used to have 2 Italian prune trees that I made.
I learned a lot of good things.
Plum jam, plum preserves of all kinds. But
We both
they have been taken down by subsequent storms. One went down in the storm in 2015, and the other one came down this year.
Oh.
Without plum trees. Just I'm kind of too busy to do that. I'm just not going to plant plum trees. It would take them, well, of course, it'd take them a few years before they yield
established
anyway,
and
so
yield.
maybe.
I mean, it was so,
We have 2 apple trees in our backyard.
lots of things.
And last year, I put
I
up
remember there, one
22
stoplight
quarts of applesauce and
met a
16
little boy on
quarts
the street.
of pre-made apple pie filling.
Nice.
Canned up.
That's great.
This year, those proportions are going to be inverted. We're doing more pies this year.
Nice.
But, yeah, that's,
People
I
couldn't.
bought one of them little
And then he looked
widgets
up at me and said, and you are very old.
Eels cores,
Yeah.
in half a
Yep,
second. You
yep.
put it on the thing and it
Yeah,
was
I have
just
one of
like
those
that,
too.
right?
Yep, they're handy.
How did I do
Really
this for
handy.
years without one of those?
Really handy.
For 19 bucks, that thing,
They're great. I bought one when my kids were little as a way of exciting them about eating apples.
right?
Because you could just peel
Yeah, yeah,
them.
yeah, it
They
was a
liked-
nifty
because
treat, yeah.
They could do it, right?
Yeah,
And then you
right.
could peel it off.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, that thing, you just slice down the middle, boom, there's your apple pie filling. You,
Yep.
you know, stuff it
I
in
know,
the
it's
can,
great.
you know?
It makes it nothing, it's a nothing job once you
Yeah.
have one of those. Yep.
Scary
They're
walking
great.
around
Just mix up some
on their airplane.
cornstarch syrup and, or, I mean, you know, sugar and water and spices and pour it in and
Good to go.
bath them.
Apple pies are great.
What do they say?
We do that. We make a pie. I have my kids half the time, so every other week. And at least every other time they're there, we make a pie.
That was,
Pretty cool.
they were both really fancy.
A friend whose children,
This is like Nepal, I didn't.
he loves pie.
Yes,
His dessert of choice.
pie is
His
is king in our house
For
too.
his birthday, his
Yeah.
children gave him
Did,
a one-day pie making workshop
Oh,
in Port
awesome.
Angeles, Washington. So he's going up this weekend for a day on Saturday
Port Angeles, huh?
and spend the day
So
making.
the
There you go. Awesome,
It's really fun.
awesome.
Really such a clever present.
love to go see
That is it. My daughter and I have a saying about that sort of thing. That
When I went to Nepal,
why in the world would anyone have cake when you can have birthday pie?
Right.
Right? I mean, because that's our.
they pay everything, and Russia was all paid. Usually they are, but David Kelly, like amazing.
How much time do you imagine that we have?
Well, it's 5 of, so I would imagine she'll be here any minute.
And that's the first time it's happened. I know, but anyway, interesting. So I quit my DAC membership for 2 years. So you need to pay for it.
Wow, that's a,
man.
Because I thought I should afford it.
well, I don't have any money for traveling between here and my house, and it's on foot. So.
But I think the Korea trip wouldn't, you wouldn't
They
have to
pay
put in.
everything when you get there. The city would pay you to play fair.
So they'll accommodate you.
Oh,
The
okay.
city would have to approve the play fair. But they would, Korea, they say they absolutely pay for it. Russia, they do.
So you're their guest.
Wow, well, that would be affordable.
Yeah. So like for me, if I wanted to bring my husband, we'd have to pay his airfare and
Kitty
ancillary
took
stuff.
Kitty took her husband to Russia, and she had to pay
Yeah.
and his airfare and food and all that stuff.
For the counselor.
Hey, it's sounding better and better. I'll save a week's worth of groceries at least.
And they probably feed you really well, too. I heard the Korea trip's really nice.
Well, I'm ready to go.
Is she here? Okay, folks, we have a candidate in the House.
Do you want to just send me electric? No, I'll sign her.
I saw her walk in with us. Why not? It doesn't have too much.
I didn't actually remember that was 150. Well, we interviewed.
I know.
We actually pointed 20.
Hi, good
So it's going on to
afternoon.
30.
Thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if you've just raced in. We're a few minutes ahead of schedule, so if you just need a minute,
Okay.
I can let
I
you
did
sort of.
just race here from LCC where I proctored a final exam, so.
Okay, so, right. So we'll give you a minute, and there's water there if you need just to,
Thank you very much.
you know, wet your whistle there.
Right, so I think I'm inclined to be a bit formal, so I did type my statement and I have copies for everyone,
Okay,
so I'll
great,
just
great.
pass that around.
Okay, so, let me just check the time here. Okay. Okay.
All right, well, thank you all so much for this opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead
So
and.
actually, you know what, if you would give me a chance to get you started.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
So I'll just sort of walk through the framework a little bit.
Okay, sure.
So as you know, you have a 3-minute opening statement, which I can tell you're eager to deliver. And then each of the counselors has prepared a question for you. And so they'll go through and ask those questions. And you'll have your 3-minute statement. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each of the counselors' questions. And then, assuming we have time at the end, the counselors have an opportunity to ask for clarification or an additional question. You have 1 minute to answer those questions. So it goes 3, 2, 1. And then just one other kind of, just so you know, the framework and the schedule, we will, the council will deliberate at their June 26th meeting, and at that point, they will vote on their decision. So that's the framework. And now, please,
All
you may
right.
begin with your opening statement.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. So many years ago, I sat in on the course of a respected colleague, and he gave the most moving and beautiful lecture, and I was really quite in awe of what he had done. But as soon as the last student left the classroom, he turned to me and he said, "I'm glad that's over because now I can be me again." I was baffled by this because even then I recognized that I was never more fully myself than when I was doing the work of teaching. That is as true today as it was then, hence it occurred to me that the best way to convey who I am, what I value, and what I would be like as a colleague is to say a bit about the principles that guide my work. I've given them names. I call them the principles of design, amelioration, and charity, and I'll say just a few words about each of them. In 1943, faced with the task of rebuilding the House of Commons after it had been destroyed by the Nazis, Winston Churchill said to the members of Parliament, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us." Churchill understood that how we shape our institutions, including our public policies and spaces, matters, because those institutions will in turn shape us. Just as there are practical consequences to placing a television in a child's bedroom, so are there practical consequences to neglecting to add a crosswalk to a busy street. The principle of design compels us to craft our public policies and public spaces in ways that make it easy and enjoyable for people to do the things that keep them safe and help them to flourish. Design is related to amelioration. To ameliorate something is to improve it in a meaningful way. When we are confronted with a situation that is not what we know it should be within our community, I believe we have an obligation to work to improve it. Knowing how to do that means educating ourselves, looking to what other communities have done when confronted with similar problems, calling on relevant experts, and drawing from the resources, both intellectual and practical, of our community members. Amelioration is an ideal that I am mindful of every day because I believe that we can and should always be using our resources to make something meaningfully better. Now, that doesn't mean we can fix it all or fix it all at once, but we don't have to. As I so often say to my students, we can't do everything, but we can't not do anything. In the profession of philosophy, we abide by the principle of charity when we read philosophical literature. To read charitably means assuming the intelligence of the author, and therefore assuming that he or she has good reasons for his or her beliefs. Charity also calls us to assume that we have something important to learn from every author. By reading charitably, we discover important truths that we might have passed over had we allowed our prejudices to blind us. I believe wholeheartedly that we must apply the principle of charity to each other. And so I take Abraham Lincoln's wisdom to heart. "I do not like that man," he once said. "I must get to know him better." The principles of design, amelioration, and charity are so much more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now ready for the questions, and the first question from Councillor Taylor.
Okay. Describe experiences you have had which contribute to your ability to be a city councilor. This could include education, employment, volunteer work, family, or social relationships.
Yes. Okay, where to begin? I think I'll begin with what I've been doing the most recently and maybe work backwards from there. So most recently, I've been employed by Lane Community College. In case you all are not aware, as of last Wednesday, I officially lost my job because LCC cut several programs, including my program, philosophy. And so, now and for the last several years I've been working there, and I've been doing much more than teaching philosophy part-time. I've been fascinated since I got there with trying to work to improve the infrastructure of the college, and I've had a lot of success, and so I've served on multiple committees and councils. I've basically gone and talked to everyone I could find who'd talk to me to think about ways to improve the college. And so one of the things that I have done, and I'm very proud of having accomplished this, is I was able to organize our first ever Center for Teaching and Learning, which is a physical space, but also a symbolic space where teachers can come together and collaborate on any work related to teaching and learning. And it's often a space where students and faculty will come together and talk about the challenges of learning. So I've done many projects like that at Lane. That's just the most recent. And I think it's the most substantial as well. So I have a lot of experience working with others, working across differences, professional differences, ideological differences, religious differences, gender differences, and on and on. And it's been a privilege to me to be able to work across those differences. I really do believe if we focus on our shared problems, that we can avoid getting caught up in our disagreements and find ways to reach meaningful agreements on issues that matter. Always in my teaching, this is something I've embodied, whether it's my teaching at Lane or my teaching at the U of O, most recently for the Clark Honors College. And so I teach my students these same things. If we want a better world, we have to redesign, we have to rethink, and we have to work together. This is something that plays out in my daily life. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So, thank you. And just so you know, you can check your time right on this timer right in front of you. It's on your desk.
That's new to me.
There you go. So that'll help you. And the next one? Next is Councillor Pryor.
Thank you. Hi, Carolyn.
Hello.
Please tell us how you balance your personal values and priorities with the values and priorities of your ward or with the values and priorities of the city as a whole.
Yes, that's such an important question. I'll say a bit about background first. So I've been teaching for, I believe, 14 years now. And in that time, students who I've known for many years have often come and said to me, one of the things I really appreciated about your teaching is I never knew what you believed. I never knew what your religion was. I never knew your ethical preferences, and it meant a lot to me because it meant I could believe what I want to. That's very, very important to me, and it would be very, very important to me in this position. That's not to say that I don't have my own values, and that I don't have my own, I hope, well-informed opinions on issues that matter. But were I to be in a position of service, those personal opinions would not matter all that much. That's my honest opinion. I would be more concerned with eliciting others' opinions, and more importantly than understanding their opinions, understanding their reasons. I think if I could understand the reasons why people held the positions they did on various issues, we could find strands of continuity, strands of agreement, right, especially across really obvious differences. And so really doing that would be my priority, and that's how I would balance my values with the values of the folks in my ward.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And next is Councillor Evans.
Welcome.
Thank you.
As a city councilor, how do you define social justice, and how would you lead the city towards its human rights goals?
Wow, that is a question. I feel I could write a dissertation on that. So how do I define social justice? Social justice is language that, as I believe you know, some of us at LCC have been pushing for institutionally. And I've participated in long conversations about what social justice means and what it ought to mean and what the practical implications of an emphasis on social justice are. It also profoundly informs my teaching, especially my course that I call Real Ethics, which is about redesigning for social justice. How would I state it? Okay, well, it has to begin with an acknowledgement that we are all entitled to dignity. If we don't have that basic concept that every human being is entitled to dignity, then no thought about justice is going to get us very far. Social justice to me is about equity versus equality, where equality would be a sort of mathematical, right, parsing of things. Equity is about making sure that people have their needs met so that they can live in dignity. I've often had my students work together to come up with lists of the things that we need to retain our human dignity, practical things like food and water, but also theoretical things like recognition from others. And for me, social justice is about ensuring that everyone has those needs met so that they can live lives of dignity, the sorts of lives that I believe we were meant to live as human beings. How would I prioritize it? Well, often there's a very practical aspect. I really believe that if someone does not have clean water to drink, their dignity is at risk. And so for me, social justice would mean making sure that people have those very basic needs met. But then going beyond basic needs, people need opportunities for recreation. They need opportunities to interact and to feel that they belong to a community. And they need opportunities to enjoy the arts and to further educate themselves. So all of those would be priorities.
Yeah. Thank you. Next is Councillor Semple.
Hi.
What do you think about City Hall? Include process, location, design, and most importantly, funding.
Yeah, I have to say of the questions I've heard so far, I think this is the one that I'm the least competent to answer in a really thoughtful way, in part because it's something, you know, as a citizen of Eugene, it's something I've heard debates about for many years without, I think, ever fully understanding the positions of all of the people involved, probably mostly because I've been working on other projects. It's something where I've not taken the time to properly educate myself, so I think one of my priorities would be doing that. I could give you sort of a gut impression, and that is, well, I think that public spaces matter tremendously, in part because of what they represent. But I mean, I was talking about Churchill's principle in design. Design matters. It influences our behavior. Where City Hall is located matters for our community. Right? And so with design in terms of location and the design of physical spaces, including rooms like this one, we have to think about what it is we're trying to accomplish. And we have to work with people who understand design, who can help us, and with people who understand economics and human behavior and how people will react to the design of a space in a way that serves our purposes and the goals we're trying to achieve. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
And next is Councillor Clark.
Hi, Carolyn. Please tell us your general impression or how would you characterize the people of Ward 4, their common views and values compared to other wards? And the second part would be what makes you the best fit to represent the people of Ward 4?
Yes. So what generalizations could I make? Well, I think that Ward 4 is known for being somewhat conservative politically compared to the other wards in the city. And I would say that's a fair comparison based on my experience, especially my experience working in the local schools throughout the city and in surrounding areas, and based on my experience of working in my neighborhood and with my students at LCC. I think that's a fair generalization. However, it's so funny to me because one doesn't see a lot of evidence of it in actual interactions. Because I would characterize the people of Ward 4 as being charitable and accommodating and kind and thoughtful and intelligent, reasonably well-informed on issues that matter. And so I don't think we're that different from most Eugenians. And I think that there are a lot of fundamental values that we have in common with the other members of our community. One is that we have a sense of community that doesn't exist everywhere. That just doesn't exist everywhere, but it's part of what makes Eugene special, and it's part of what makes Ward 4 special. There's a very strong sense of community that cuts across all kinds of differences. And I see it in my physical neighborhood. I've so often heard people say, people don't know their neighbors anymore. I don't think that's true in Ward 4 as a generalization. I think it's unacceptable. I know it's not true on my street. We all know each other. We know each other's names and families and situations. And I think that may be another rather special characteristic of our ward in particular. Could you kindly repeat the second part of your question?
Okay. What makes you the best representative of those?
Well, here's the simple answer. So I think that you could say I've always been the diplomat in my family. So I spent a lot of my childhood here in Eugene, but I also spent a lot of it in Eastern Oregon, Pendleton, Oregon. I have a very, very conservative family, and I've always been the person to help those in our family who are a little bit more progressive see eye to eye with those who are more conservative. And in fact, that's what I'm always called on to do. And I think that's what makes me a good representative. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
My question is about climate change, Carolyn. In a survey done by the city, 75% of Eugene residents agreed that climate change requires a much stronger regulation of greenhouse gas emissions. Do you agree or disagree with this statement, and why? The second part is, when it comes to funding for climate change projects, do you see them as being on par with essential services like libraries, parks, police, and fire, or do you think that funding is more discretionary and we should fund these projects as money is available? So the first part is about much stronger regulation of greenhouse gas emissions.
Wonderful questions. Hugely ethically significant. If ever there was a shared problem, climate change is one. So I am married to a chemist, and as part of my teaching ethics, I've worked hard to educate myself on climate change and the science of climate change. And I do think we absolutely need to do more to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. One thing I would say, though, that I'm not hearing a lot of talk about that I think is important, and we as a country need to talk about, is which gases we're targeting. So CO2 has been sort of a villain in this discussion, and that is not necessarily appropriate. It is problematic, but if you look at gases like methane, at peak they have a much higher heat trapping capacity than CO2. Methane is something like 20% at maximum, the heat trapping capacity. So even though we produce less as a country, it's like 6% of the total. Proportionally, in terms of the impact on the climate, it's huge. Nitrous oxide is another who talks about that, right? But it is another important greenhouse gas that we need to be regulating. I should also mention my mother is an environmental engineer and works for the Department of Energy, so she works on regulating these sorts of things too. So it's an issue in our family. I think that often people don't like any regulation that they feel limits their freedom, and we need to take that very, very seriously. So we need to think about creative solutions. Often it's possible to solve multiple problems at once. So we might have a given business that is being tasked with decreasing emissions, and there might be a way to do that, for them to do that while saving them money, while increasing their business, while improving their public image, and so on and so forth. So I think it would be very, very important to work at making regulations as palatable as possible, and seeing that we have a shared interest, and many shared interests actually related to this, and that we can find solutions that take those into account.
Thank you. And at last, Councilor Syrett.
Yes.
So how do you view the role of neighborhood associations in determining city policy, keeping in mind that not all Eugene neighborhoods have active associations?
Yes, well, I think that they have numerous very important roles to play, and one of them is informing policy decision making. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they should have a sort of political power to make decisions, but at the very least, the views of neighborhood associations need to be taken very seriously, because let's think about who decides to join a neighborhood association. This is someone who has a sense of community, who understands the place they live, who is working to understand the people around them, who knows maybe better than we might from an outside perspective what the people in their community need and want. And so at the very least, we have, I think, an ethical obligation to listen very carefully and to let our decisions be informed by what they have to say. Now, if for any reason our prejudices or whatever we're inclined to believe, or whichever policies we're more inclined to accept, make it more difficult for us to do that, I think we would have an obligation to acknowledge that and to think about ways to rebalance decision-making authority, so that neighborhood associations would have more authority in that case. So, thank you.
Thank you. So that's the end of the set group of questions, and now we have time for some additional clarification questions. So, would you all do any counselors need to raise a hand? Are you going to do yours?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Counselor Zelenka.
So,
And just a reminder, this is a 1-minute response.
Thank you.
Caroline, you don't have to, but you might find yourself in the position of having to run for city council and run a campaign.
Yes.
What's your experience in doing that? Would you do it? And,
Yes.
And how would you approach that?
Well, I love philosophy. I love ethics. I love teaching. But I think I'm at a point in my career where I feel it's time to do something more to serve in a more robust way. And so I've actually been considering running for office for a while. And what's funny is I kept the idea to myself until very recently because of the job cut at Lane. And as soon as I started sharing it with others, the reaction was a little bit overwhelming. They said basically the same thing. Why didn't you think of this earlier? Why didn't you do this earlier? So I think I have the personality to do it. I think I have the passion and the drive and the desire to be educated and to contribute that I would need. As far as skills that would help in a campaign organization, I mean, connections with members of the community and just a whole lot of friends who would support me, really, and colleagues. So I think I could pull it off, and I'm thinking about it. So.
Great. And yes.
One of the things that, I'm sorry about the budget cuts and you losing your job. A lot of people get anchored by their job. And so a question pops up.
Yeah.
So would that draw you away from the community looking for another teaching job? What's your response?
You might be surprised to learn that a PhD in philosophy doesn't get you all that many different jobs. And seeing as how I'm not intending to become a barista just now, my options have always been limited. I knew that when I chose to stay in this community. My family and I made a conscious decision to stay here knowing that I might not be able to find academic work, but knowing that I would find something meaningful and useful. We just felt that this community meant so much to us. It wasn't worth going somewhere else, not for any job, not for any amount of money. I've learned to be overworked and underpaid. I should never say that in a job interview, but that's the truth. And as long as I feel that what I'm doing is meaningful, I'm content with that. And I would no doubt be doing other small projects because I always am. I'm always writing and I'm always thinking and I'm always doing community outreach. But it wouldn't necessarily pull me away from any work here. So.
Thank you. I have to just say you really nailed it on the timing. Once you figured out that was a timing machine, you really had it. It's a good skill. Thank you very much for.
It takes years.
Right. It's just, you're right. You're right. Maybe. There you go. So thank you very much for throwing your hat in the ring, for taking the time to answer our questions thoughtfully, and we'll be deliberating. The council will be deliberating on the 26th, as I said before. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Could I say one more thing? It's very little. If there's okay. Well,
I don't know. We haven't really offered that to other candidates.
Over her
You can do it off the record.
You can do it off the record. Okay.
Off the record,
fine.
is that all
Yeah.
right? Well, I just wanted to say, if I were not to be chosen for this position, and ever it would be useful to any of you to just spend time talking with someone who specializes in ethics, I would be so privileged to do that. I really mean that because I think it matters that we have ethical thinking in our politics. So
Terrific. Thank
all
you
right.
so much.
Thank
That's
you all
great.
so
Thank
much
you.
for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you. We are finished.
Good.